When a billionaire CEO receives an invitation to his ex's wedding, he hires a warm-hearted cafe owner as his fake date, only to find something real in the charade. Can love outshine ambition? Let's find out. Share where you're listening from and rate this emotional roller coaster from 0 to 10 in the comments. Your city might inspire our next story. The morning sun sliced through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sebastian Whitmore's corner office, casting sharp shadows across his polished oak desk. At 45, with his blonde hair impeccably styled and his tailored suit a silent testament to his $4 billion empire, Sebastian was the picture of control. Whitmore Pharmaceuticals dominated the industry, its name synonymous with innovation and ruthlessness. Yet today, a single cream-colored envelope disrupted his carefully orchestrated world, lying like a landmine among the morning's financial reports. Its elegant calligraphy, Mr. Sebastian Whitmore and guest, seemed a pulse with a life of their own, demanding his attention over the hum of his assistant, Clara's efficient typing outside. Sebastian's fingers hovered over the envelope, hesitating. He didn't need to open it to know its contents. For months, high society whispers had buzzed about Victoria Langley's wedding to Julian Carver, the charming rival who'd stolen both his largest client and his fiancée 3 years ago. The memory of that night still burned. Victoria, radiant in emerald silk, walking out of their engagement dinner on Julian's arm. "You love your company more than me, Sebastian," she'd said, her voice cold as steel. "Julian sees me as a partner, not a prize." The words had carved a wound deeper than he'd admitted, their truth festering beneath his relentless drive to build an empire. His intercom crackled. "Mr. Whitmore, the Carver Tech team is here for your 9:30. Clara's voice was crisp, oblivious to the storm brewing within him. "Send them in." Sebastian slid the envelope into a drawer, its weight lingering in his mind like a ghost. The meeting passed in a blur, charts, projections, Julian's smug team presenting their latest coup. But Sebastian's thoughts kept drifting to that cursed invitation. By noon, along with his untouched espresso, he surrendered and retrieved it. The paper was heavy, luxurious, the kind reserved for events meant to be remembered. Grand Regency Hotel, Saturday, black tie. Mr. Sebastian Whitmore and guest. He laughed, a hollow sound echoing in the sterile office. Guest? As if he had anyone to bring. Sebastian's life was a fortress of his own making, its walls built from 80-hour weeks and sleepless nights. Whitmore Pharmaceuticals had soared under his obsessive leadership, its breakthroughs saving lives while its profits silenced critics. But his personal life had withered to a husk. Claire, his last girlfriend, had left after a year, tired of competing with his company. Before her, Emily had lasted 6 months, issuing the same ultimatum Victoria had. Choose love or work. Each time, he'd chosen work, convincing himself it was enough. Now, at the pinnacle of success, he sat alone, surrounded by glass and steel, the city sprawling 40 stories below, like a glittering taunt. The invitation mocked him. Attending Victoria's wedding meant facing her triumph, Julian's gloating smile, and the pitying glances of an elite circle who'd watched his humiliation unfold in real time. He could decline, bury himself in work as always, but something stopped him. Pride, perhaps, or a flicker of curiosity about the man he'd become since Victoria's betrayal. 3 years had passed, yet her words still echoed. "You love your company more than me." Had he proven her right, or could he prove her wrong? His phone buzzed, a text from his sister, Lila. "Saw Victoria's wedding in the news. You okay?" Sebastian stared at the screen, fingers hovering. "Fine. Busy." He sent the reply, but Lila's response was swift. "You're always busy. When did you last live?" The question stung, unearthing a truth he'd buried. When had his life become so small? Days bled into nights. marked only by board meetings and stock ticks. The city sparkled below, alive with people taking risks, falling in love, while he remained entombed in his empire, too afraid to step beyond its walls. Sebastian's fingers found the invitation again, its edges worn from his restless touch. Maybe attending would offer closure, a chance to see Victoria happy and finally let go. Or maybe he was just tired of being alone. The decision crystallized with startling clarity. He would go, but not alone. He wouldn't give Victoria and Julian the satisfaction of seeing him defeated, a solitary figure amid their fairy tale celebration. He needed someone to stand beside him, someone who could navigate the evening with grace and keep his dignity intact. But who? He closed his laptop, a rare act before midnight, and grabbed his coat. For the first time in months, Sebastian Whitmore left his office while the sun still shone, driven by a need he couldn't name. Tomorrow, he'd find a way to face his past. Tonight, he needed to convince himself this wasn't a mistake. As the elevator descended, the city's pulse seemed to call him, whispering of possibilities he'd long ignored. Somewhere out there, an answer waited. Someone who could change everything. Sebastian Whitmore stepped onto the bustling sidewalk, the city's evening hum a stark contrast to the sterile silence of his office. The decision to attend Victoria's wedding had ignited a restless urgency in him, a need to reclaim something he couldn't yet name. But who could he bring to face the glittering spectacle of his past? His social circle was a wasteland of business contacts and fleeting flings, none suited for the role of poised companion. As he walked, the city's lights blurred, mirroring the chaos in his mind. 3 days later, desperation led him to Brewhaven, a small cafe 6 blocks from his tower of glass and steel. Clara usually handled his coffee runs, but today, Sebastian needed to step out of his world, if only for a moment. The cafe's door chimed, releasing a wave of roasted bean aroma that enveloped him like a warm embrace. Brewhaven was nothing like the corporate haunts he frequented. Mismatched wooden chairs, exposed brick walls adorned with local art, and a gentle buzz of conversation that felt alive, human. Students hunched over laptops, young professionals laughed over lattes, and the chaos was oddly comforting, a stark departure from the aggressive silence of boardrooms. Sebastian adjusted his tie, feeling out of place in his $5,000 suit, and approached the counter. Behind it stood Willow Harper, a vision of effortless beauty, with golden hair swept into a loose braid, her hazel eyes sparkling with a warmth that caught him off guard. "What can I get started for you?" Her voice was bright, unhurried, as if she had all the time in the world for him. "Large black coffee," Sebastian said, glancing at the chalkboard menu, its colorful swirls disorienting after years of minimalist corporate aesthetics. Willow tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that felt like a spotlight. "You look like you'd enjoy our Ethiopian blend. Bold, layered, not too heavy. Or am I reading you wrong?" He raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her boldness. "Analyzing my coffee or my soul?" She laughed, a sound as natural as sunlight breaking through clouds. "Maybe both. I'm Willow, by the way. And you're in a suit that costs more than my car, so you're either lost or your life needs better coffee." "Sebastian," he replied, disarmed by her directness. Her smile reached her eyes, free of the calculated polish he was used to from women in his world. "I'm neither lost nor desperate. Everyone's desperate for something." Willow began preparing his drink with practiced efficiency, her movements precise yet graceful. "The question is whether they're brave enough to admit it." Her words landed like a dart, piercing the armor he'd worn for years. He watched her work, noting the care she put into each step, as if crafting his coffee was an art form. "How long have you worked here?" 3 years, she said, pride coloring her voice. "Bought in as a partner last summer. It's small, but it's mine." Partner in a café, he said, the words slipping out before he could catch them. Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of defensiveness replacing her warmth. Let me guess, she said, sliding his coffee across the counter, their fingers brushing, a jolt of electricity he hadn't expected. You measure success in stock prices and corner offices. The accuracy stung, echoing Victoria's accusations. That's a quick judgment. Is it wrong? Her gaze held his, unflinching, as if she could see the man beneath the billionaire facade. No, he admitted after a beat, surprising himself. It's not wrong. Something shifted in her expression, the edge softening. I wasn't trying to insult you. I serve guys like you every day. All business, no life. When's the last time you did something just for fun? The question hung between them, heavy with truth. Fun? The concept was as foreign as the cozy chaos of this cafe. His life was a relentless cycle of deals and deadlines, each victory hollower than the last. I should go, he said, gripping his coffee too tightly. Wait. Her voice stopped him, softer now. Sorry, I don't mean to pry. You just seem lonely. The observation cut deeper than he cared to admit, exposing a truth he'd buried under quarterly reports. My life's full, he said, but the words sounded defensive, weak. Full of what? Willow leaned against the counter, chin propped on her hand, her hazel eyes searching his. Deals, numbers, things that matter to your wallet but not your heart? You don't know me, he said, but there was no heat in it. No, but I know that look. She straightened, suddenly self-conscious. I see it in the mirror sometimes. Like you're winning at everything except happiness. Her words lingered, raw and unfiltered as customers entered, pulling her attention away. Sebastian found himself reluctant to leave, drawn to this woman who saw through his carefully constructed walls with alarming ease. Same time tomorrow, she called as he reached the door. Maybe, he said, pausing with his hand on the handle. Her smile was brilliant, unguarded, and for a moment, the city's chaos outside seemed quieter. I'll take maybe. Outside, the world roared back to life, honking taxis, rushing pedestrians. But Sebastian walked to his office with Willow's words echoing in his mind. Successful at everything except happiness. The truth followed him to the 40th floor, settling into his chest like an unwelcome guest. He'd come to Brewhaven seeking a solution, a date to salvage his pride at Victoria's wedding. Instead, he'd found a mirror reflecting a man he barely recognized. Tomorrow he'd return, not just for coffee, but for the chance to feel seen, if only for a moment. Sebastian Whitmore woke the next morning with Willow Harper's words still echoing in his mind, a persistent hum beneath the city's dawn chorus. Successful at everything except happiness. The truth had burrowed deep, unsettling him in ways his boardroom battles never had. He'd returned to his penthouse last night, the skyline glittering beyond his windows. But the view felt hollow, a reminder of the life he'd built. Impressive, yet empty. Brewhaven had been a detour, a desperate grasp for a solution to Victoria's wedding, but Willow's piercing gaze had left him questioning more than his guest list. Today, he'd go back, not just for coffee, but for the spark of something real she'd ignited. By noon, Sebastian stood outside the cafe, the chime of its bell pulling him into its warm embrace. Brewhaven buzzed with the lunchtime crowd, students debating over textbooks, professionals tapping at laptops. But Willow's presence behind the counter drew his focus like a beacon. Her blonde braid swung as she moved, her smile lighting the room as she bantered with a regular. "Ethiopian blend again?" she asked when he reached the counter, her hazel eyes twinkling with recognition. "You remembered," Sebastian said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I remember my regulars. She started his order with the same graceful precision he'd noticed yesterday. Though you're not a regular yet. 2 visits don't make a pattern. What does? He asked, leaning against the counter, intrigued by her ease. Consistency, she said, glancing up. Showing up, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. Her gaze sharpened. You look like you're carrying a heavy decision. Sebastian's fingers tightened around the coffee cup. She slid it toward him. The wedding invitation had haunted him for days, a puzzle he couldn't solve. Logic screamed to skip it, to avoid Victoria's triumph, and Julian's smug grin. But pride, or perhaps a need to close that chapter, held him back. Hypothetically, he began, his voice low, if someone needed a date for a social event. Willow's eyebrows rose, amusement dancing in her eyes. Are you asking me out? No. He cleared his throat, feeling uncharacteristically off balance. It's complicated. Complicated how? She leaned against the counter, studying him with that unnerving perceptiveness. It's my ex-fiancée's wedding, he admitted, the words tasting bitter. I don't want to show up alone, looking like the pathetic ex who never moved on. Have you moved on? Her question cut straight to the core, gentle but unrelenting. I thought I had. The honesty surprised him, spilling out like a confession. Now I'm not sure. When's the wedding? Saturday. Grand Regency Hotel. She whistled softly. Fancy. So, you want a fake girlfriend for the evening? Someone to smile prettily and make your ex jealous? That's... He paused, realizing she'd nailed his motive with embarrassing precision. Yes, exactly. She poured herself a coffee, her movements deliberate as she processed his words. What's in it for me? Money, he said instinctively, his default solution to every problem. Her expression cooled, the warmth draining from her eyes. Stop. Her voice was sharp, slicing through the cafe's hum. You want to hire me as an escort? No, I didn't mean... He faltered, his usual eloquence failing him. How did you mean it then? She crossed her arms, waiting, her gaze a challenge. Sebastian ran a hand through his blonde hair, feeling every one of his 45 years. I'm not good at this, he admitted quietly. I negotiate billion-dollar deals, but asking for personal help, I keep making it a transaction. Her anger softened, a flicker of understanding crossing her face. Maybe because you see everything as a transaction. Maybe, he said, the admission like stepping into uncharted territory. Maybe that's why she left me. Willow sipped her coffee, studying him over the rim. This wedding, it's important to you. I need to face her, he said, meeting her gaze. Face what I lost and why. I can't do it alone. Why me? Because you see me, he said simply. Not my bank account or my title. You see the man underneath and you're not impressed. It's refreshing. She laughed, a soft sound without mockery. That's the strangest compliment I've ever gotten. Will you consider it? She was quiet for a moment, the cafe's chatter filling the space. I'll think about it, she said finally. And, Sebastian, if I say yes, it's not because you're paying me. The next morning, Sebastian returned to Brewhaven, his nerves a live wire despite years of high-stakes negotiations. Willow was training a new barista, Ellie, her patience evident as she demonstrated the espresso machine's quirks. Consistency comes with practice, she said, her voice warm. Watching her, Sebastian realized her kindness wasn't reserved for him. It was who she was, a stark contrast to the calculated interactions of his world. I'll be with you in a minute, she called, not looking away from Ellie. He settled at a corner table, pulling out his phone to check emails, but his eyes kept drifting to Willow. She moved with grace, treating each customer, nervous student or harried executive, with equal respect. When, Had he stopped seeing people as individuals, viewing them only as assets or obstacles? Ethiopian blend? Willow slid into the chair across from him 20 minutes later, a cautious smile playing on her lips. You brought it to me, he noted, surprised. Thought you'd appreciate the service. She sipped her coffee. I've been thinking about your proposition. His chest tightened, a rare flicker of nervousness. And? I have questions. She leaned forward, her gaze steady. What does this evening entail? I'm guessing the Grand Regency isn't a jeans and sneakers kind of place. Black tie, he said. Dinner, dancing, speeches that drag on. You'd need a formal dress. I can... Don't say you'll pay for it, she warned, her tone firm but gentle. I was going to say I know a boutique, he smiled faintly. What you spend is your call. Better, she nodded. Second question. What's our story? How did we meet? How long have we been dating? What do I need to know about your ex to avoid landmines? Her thoroughness impressed him. We met here, at the cafe. Dating for a few weeks. Nothing serious yet. Victoria's beautiful, ambitious, and from tech money. She left because she said I prioritized work over her. Did you? Willow's question was soft but pointed. Yes, he admitted, the truth easier now. I built an empire, but I lost what mattered. Her expression shifted, not pity, but understanding. You're doing this to prove you've changed. Have I? He asked, half to himself. That's what we'll find out. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his briefly. I'll do it. Relief flooded him. Thank you. But I have conditions, she added, her voice firm. No money. This is one person helping another, not a job. Agreed. Second, we spend time together before Saturday. If we're dating, we need to know basic things, favorite foods, family quirks. The prospect of spending time with her outside the cafe was both thrilling and daunting. How much time? A few hours. Dinner tomorrow? Somewhere quiet where we can talk. I know a place, he said, already rethinking his instinct for a flashy restaurant. Not too fancy, she warned. I want to hear you, not perform for photographers. He nodded. Third condition. If this feels wrong for either of us, we call it off. No hard feelings. Deal. He extended his hand. Partners. She shook it, her grip warm and steady. Partners. As Sebastian left Brew Haven, the city's chaos seemed less jarring, softened by the promise of tomorrow's dinner. Willow Harper had agreed to be his shield against Victoria's wedding, but something deeper was taking root, a chance to rediscover the man he'd buried beneath his empire. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of hope, fragile but undeniable. Sebastian Whitmore stood in his penthouse, the mirror reflecting a man in a flawless tuxedo, but his racing heart betrayed the facade of control. 3 days had passed since Willow Harper agreed to be his date for Victoria's wedding, and their dinner at the quiet Italian bistro had woven a fragile thread of connection between them. Her candid questions about his family, her stories of her own, and the way her hazel eyes saw through his corporate armor had left him both exhilarated and unnerved. Now, as he adjusted his bow tie for the third time, the weight of the evening pressed down. The Grand Regency Hotel awaited, a glittering stage where he'd face his past. He'd hired a car to collect Willow, and the 45-minute drive to Brooklyn gave him time to rehearse their story. Met at Brew Haven, dating casually for weeks. Yet, beneath the script, a question lingered. Could this night be more than a performance? The car pulled up to Willow's brownstone in Park Slope, a neighborhood of tree-lined streets and lived-in charm that felt worlds away from his sterile Manhattan. She emerged from the lobby, and Sebastian's breath caught. The emerald gown hugged her frame, its deep green silk catching the streetlights, transforming her from cafe owner to a vision of elegance. Her blonde hair was swept into an updo, revealing the graceful curve of her neck, and her confidence outshone the polished women of his social sphere. "You clean up well?" she teased, slipping her arm through his, her warmth grounding him. "Ready for this?" "Ask me tomorrow," he replied, helping her into the car, their easy banter easing his nerves. As they drove, Willow asked about his penthouse, his favorite restaurants. Steering clear of the wedding, Sebastian found himself relaxing, her presence a shield against the looming spectacle. The Grand Regency's ballroom was a fairy tale come to life, with cascades of white orchids dripping from crystal chandeliers and soft lighting casting an intimate glow over the elite crowd. Tech moguls, pharma tycoons, and old money heirs mingled, their whispers a backdrop to the string quartet's melody. Sebastian felt eyes on them as they paused at the entrance, and Willow squeezed his arm. "Breathe," she whispered, her voice steady. "I am," he said. But her raised eyebrow called out his lie. "You're hyperventilating quietly. There's a difference." She adjusted his bow tie with gentle fingers, her touch sparking warmth. "We'll walk in, meet a few people, eat overpriced food, drink champagne, and go home. Simple." "And if someone asks how we met?" he asked, grateful for her calm. "Coffee shop, you were rude. I called you out and you found it charming enough to ask me out," she said, her mischievous smile disarming him. They stepped forward, her hand in his, and for the first time, Sebastian didn't care about the staring crowd. The receiving line moved with practiced efficiency, and Sebastian's pulse quickened as Victoria appeared. Radiant in a French couture gown, her beauty as calculated as ever. Her smile was polite until it landed on him, flickering with surprise, then sharpening as she assessed Willow. "Sebastian, I'm so glad you came," she said, extending a hand, her voice warm but edged. "Congratulations, Victoria, you look stunning," he replied, his tone steady. Willow extended her hand, her smile genuine. "Willow Harper, congratulations, this is gorgeous." "Thank you," Victoria said, her gaze dissecting Willow. "How do you two know each other?" "We met at my coffee shop," Willow said smoothly. "He tried ordering black coffee like it was a hostile takeover, and I suggested something better." Victoria's laugh was sharp, almost genuine. "That sounds like him, always so transactional." "Not always," Willow said, slipping her hand into Sebastian's with easy affection. "He's learning about coffee. I'm learning about wine. It's a fair trade." "How quaint," Victoria said, the word laced with condescension, and Sebastian's jaw tightened. But Willow's calm held him steady. Julian Carver joined them, resplendent in his tuxedo, his charm as effortless as his handshake was firm. "Sebastian, good to see you," he said, his smile lacking warmth. "Congratulations, Julian," Sebastian replied, introducing Willow, who met Julian's gaze with poise. "Pleasure to meet you," Julian said, his attention focused, but Willow deflected with humor. "I'm chasing the perfect coffee cup keeps me busy," she said, and Sebastian added, "She owns the café," pride in his voice, surprising him. "How entrepreneurial," Victoria said, her tone dripping with superiority. "It must be nice to have such simple goals." Willow's smile didn't falter. "There's something beautiful about creating a space where people connect over honest work," she said, the word honest. A subtle jab at Julian's ethics scandals. The line behind them stirred, ending the exchange, and as they moved to their table, Sebastian felt relief, not just at surviving, but at realizing Victoria's presence stirred nothing in him. At their table, Willow charmed their companions, a tech CEO, a federal judge, and real estate heiresses, with her thoughtful questions and genuine curiosity. "You own the cafe?" the judge's wife asked, intrigued. "Co-owner," Willow corrected. "I bought in this year, saved up working 3 jobs." "Admirable," the CEO said, and Willow's story of determination won them over. Sebastian watched, marveling at her ease in a world that should have intimidated her. When she glanced at him, her smile held something like affection. "He's learning patience from coffee," she said, drawing laughter, and Sebastian felt warmth spread through him. The band struck up Unchained Melody, and he stood, offering his hand. "Dance with me," he said, heart pounding. "I'm no ballroom pro," she warned. But as they moved to the floor, her body fit against his, their rhythm natural, and the world faded. "People are staring," she murmured, her breath warm against his neck. "Let them," he said, drawing her closer, her floral scent intoxicating. "This wasn't the plan." "What wasn't?" she asked, and he gestured between them. "Something real." Her eyes widened, fear and hope mingling, and Sebastian knew this night had changed everything. The Grand Regency's ballroom shimmered as the evening unfolded, its chandeliers casting a golden haze over the dance floor where Sebastian Whitmore and Willow Harper had just shared a moment that felt dangerously real. Their dance, set to Unchained Melody, had woven a fragile intimacy, her warmth against him stirring a longing he hadn't dared acknowledge. Yet, as they returned to their table, the weight of Victoria's wedding pressed back in, the elite crowd's whispers, a reminder of the performance they were meant to maintain. Willow's hand lingered in his, her hazel eyes searching his face, and Sebastian felt the pull of something deeper than their fake dating charade. During the speeches, he couldn't stop watching her, her genuine smile as the maid of honor spoke, her quiet applause for strangers' joy. But the night's magic faltered when Victoria, resplendent in a flowing second gown, approached their table, her presence like a storm cloud. "Sebastian, can we have a moment?" she asked, her voice soft but commanding, and Willow's grip tightened briefly before she stood. "Of course, I'll grab a drink," she said, her tone steady but tense, leaving Sebastian alone with the woman who'd once defined his future. Victoria settled into Willow's chair, her elegance a stark contrast to the raw authenticity Sebastian had grown to crave. "You look wonderful tonight," she said, her smile knowing, almost smug. "And marriage suits you." "I'm not married," he replied, his voice flat, resisting her charm. "Not yet," she countered, leaning closer, her perfume a familiar ghost. "But you're thinking about it, aren't you? I see how you look at her." The observation cut deep, unearthing truths he hadn't fully faced. Willow had become more than a prop. Her laughter, her perceptiveness, had cracked his armor. "She's lovely, truly," Victoria continued, her tone laced with condescension. "So authentic, so simple. Exactly what you need." "What I need," he echoed, his jaw tightening. "Someone uncomplicated, safe," she said, her fingers tracing her champagne glass. "Someone who won't challenge you or push you to be more." The words landed like a blade, sharp and precise, and Sebastian's anger flared, but doubt crept in. Had he chosen Willow for her simplicity, a shield against his own failures? "You don't know her," he said, his voice low, defensive, but Victoria's smile sharpened, undeterred. "I know enough. She owns a coffee shop, lives in Brooklyn. Probably thinks a hedge fund is a garden project," she said, her laugh silver bright and cutting. "You brought her to make me jealous, and it's working." "What?" he asked, stunned, as her pitying gaze pierced him. "Did you think I wouldn't see through this? You've been watching me all night waiting for me to regret choosing Julian," she said, her voice dropping to an intimate murmur. The accusation held a grain of truth. He had glanced at Victoria, comparing her polished perfection to Willow's warmth, but the realization sickened him. "If you loved her, really loved her, you'd have spared her this circus," Victoria added, touching his hand briefly. "You're using her as a prop to prove a point to me." The words hit like a physical blow, exposing his selfishness. And Sebastian felt the ground shift beneath him, his motives laid bare in the harsh light of her truth. "I should go," he said, starting to rise, but Victoria's voice stopped him. "I'm not trying to hurt you, I'm saving you from my mistake," she said, her eyes finding Julian across the room, softening with love. "I chose you for stability, success, but Julian made me feel alive. You're clinging to her because she's kind, safe, but she deserves more than being your crutch." She kissed his cheek, a gentle farewell, and glided away, leaving Sebastian alone with a truth he couldn't escape. He had brought Willow here for his own pride, using her authenticity as armor against his insecurities. The realization made him feel small, unworthy of the woman who'd seen him so clearly. Willow returned, her emerald gown catching the light, but her smile faltered at his distant expression. "Everything okay?" she asked, settling beside him, her voice cautious. "Fine," he said too sharply, his corporate mask slipping into place. "What did she say?" "Nothing important," he lied, avoiding her gaze. "Ready to leave?" The dismissal stung her, and Sebastian saw the hurt flicker in her eyes, but he couldn't face her warmth. Not now. The ride to Brooklyn was a study in silence, the city's lights blurring past as Sebastian stared out his window, Victoria's words echoing relentlessly. Willow studied her hands, her fingers twisting in her lap, and he knew she was replaying the evening, searching for where it had unraveled. He wanted to speak, to bridge the chasm he'd created, but guilt held him mute. Outside her brownstone, he finally spoke. "Thank you," he said, his voice hollow. "You were perfect." "You're welcome," she replied, her steadiness a quiet rebuke. "I won't hear from you, will I?" The question hung unanswered, a lie he couldn't voice. She stepped out, climbing her steps without looking back, and Sebastian watched her disappear, the weight of his failure heavier than any corporate loss. As the car pulled away, he knew he'd let something real slip through his fingers, and the cost of his pride was only beginning to dawn on him. The sting of Willow Harper's departure lingered in Sebastian Whitmore's chest as he returned to his penthouse, the city's skyline, a glittering mockery of his unraveling world. Victoria's wedding had exposed his selfishness, her accusation that he'd used Willow as a prop, cutting deeper than any corporate defeat. The memory of Willow's steady voice, "I won't hear from you, will I?" echoed in the sterile silence of his apartment, amplifying his guilt. Monday morning found him back in his glass tower, burying himself in work to escape the personal reckoning. But the weight of the weekend refused to lift. Brewhaven felt like a lost sanctuary, and Willow's absence was a void he couldn't ignore. Yet, the empire he'd built demanded his focus, and Sebastian, ever the dutiful CEO, obliged, unaware that his professional world was about to implode. By Thursday, a phone call shattered his fragile equilibrium, pulling him into a crisis that would redefine everything he thought he knew about success. Clara's urgent voice crackled through the intercom, her usual calm frayed. "Dr. Elena Voss from the FDA is on line 1. It's about Cerebrax," she said, and Sebastian's stomach dropped. Cerebrax, Whitmore Pharmaceutical's $250 million Parkinson's drug, was his crowning achievement, its approval a near certainty after 3 years of trials. "Dr. Voss, what's the issue?" he asked, gripping the phone, his voice steady despite rising dread. "We're suspending Cerebrax's approval pending investigation," she replied, her tone professionally neutral, but heavy with implication. "Reports of severe tremors in 10% of trial subjects weren't disclosed in your submissions." The words hit like a sledgehammer, and Sebastian's mind raced, searching for a misstep he couldn't fathom. All relevant data was submitted, he insisted, but her response chilled him. "We have documentation suggesting otherwise. Review your files before our meeting next week," she said, ending the call. leaving him staring at his desk, the room closing in. 4 hours later, buried in research files, Sebastian uncovered the damning truth, his horror growing with each page. Supplementary data from European trials revealed severe tremors persisting in 10% of subjects, side effects noted but excluded from FDA submissions. His team, guided by a legal memo he'd approved, had deemed the data non-critical, prioritizing approval speed over transparency, a culture he'd fostered with his relentless drive for results. "Get me Dr. Patel," he told Clara, his voice tight, "and pull every Cerebrax file from Europe." Dr. Patel, head of research, arrived pale and tense. "The lawyers said 10% was within acceptable parameters," he explained, avoiding Sebastian's gaze. "All drugs have side effects." "Acceptable for permanent tremors?" Sebastian snapped, his anger directed as much at himself as at Patel. "What about the patients who trusted us?" Patel's silence was an indictment, and Sebastian realized the moral cost of his empire's ambition, a cost he'd ignored for too long. By Friday, the news broke with ruthless force, headlines screaming, "Whitmore Pharma hid drug risks," across the Wall Street Journal and CNN. Sebastian's phone buzzed incessantly. Reporters, investors, board members demanding answers he didn't have. Stock plummeted 35%, trading was suspended, and protesters gathered outside, their signs bearing photos of Parkinson's patients harmed by Cerebrax. "The board wants an emergency meeting," Clara said, her hands trembling as she set his coffee down. "And there are reporters downstairs." Through his office windows, Sebastian saw the crowd, families, and advocates chanting for accountability, their pain a mirror to his guilt. The board convened at noon, their faces a gallery of cold calculation. "This is an existential crisis," Eleanor Grant, a veteran director, said, her voice heavy. "New leadership is needed to rebuild trust." "You're asking me to resign," Sebastian said, the words tasting like ash. And her nod confirmed the inevitable. His allies now adversaries in a game he'd taught them to play. The FDA meeting that afternoon was a professional execution. Dr. Voss presenting evidence of systemic data omissions across multiple trials, not just Cerebrax. "We're considering criminal referrals to the DOJ," she said, her gaze unflinching, "and suspending Whitmore's ability to conduct human trials." Sebastian sat silent, the scope of his failure overwhelming. By evening, alone in his office, legal documents and research reports painted a grim picture. His company had prioritized profits over patients, and he was the architect. His phone buzzed with missed calls, the world closing in, but it was Willow's memory that haunted him most. Her authenticity, her belief in honest work, stood in stark contrast to the compromises he'd championed. "You see me," he'd told her, but now he saw himself clearly. A man who'd traded integrity for dominance, and the empire he'd built was crumbling under its weight. Sebastian stared at his reflection in the office window, a 45-year-old billionaire surrounded by monuments to his ambition, yet utterly alone. The protesters' chants drifted up, a reminder of the human cost he'd ignored. He thought of calling Lila, his sister, but what could he say? That his pursuit of success had poisoned everything. Instead, Willow's face surfaced, her hazel eyes, her unfiltered honesty, and shame washed over him. She'd represented everything he'd forgotten: connection, purpose, a life beyond numbers. Now, as his empire collapsed, Sebastian faced the truth. He'd chosen profit over people, and the price was a legacy of harm. The realization was a wound, raw and urgent, setting the stage for a reckoning that would demand more than his resignation. The collapse of Whitmore Pharmaceuticals left Sebastian Whitmore adrift, his penthouse a sterile cage where the echoes of failure drowned out the city's pulse. The FDA's investigation, the stock crash, and the board's demand for his resignation had stripped him of his empire. But it was Willow Harper's quiet exit from his life that cut deepest. Victoria's accusation at the wedding, that he'd used Willow as a prop, had exposed his selfishness, and her words, "I won't hear from you, will I?" haunted him, a reminder of the connection he'd squandered. Alone in his glass tower, surrounded by news reports of Sarah Brax's victims, Sebastian faced a truth he'd long evaded. His relentless pursuit of success had cost him his integrity, his relationships, and his humanity. By Saturday night, the weight of his choices drove him to call his sister, Lila, his voice breaking as he confessed, "I've destroyed everything that matters," and her gentle response, "Find the man Willow saw," lit a faint spark of hope, urging him toward redemption. Monday dawned with a clarity born of rock bottom, and Sebastian stood in his office for the last time, the city sprawling beyond his windows like a world he no longer belonged to. His resignation letter, 3 concise paragraphs accepting blame without legal liability, sat on his desk, a final act of corporate choreography. "The board is assembled," Clara announced, her voice soft with unspoken sympathy, and Sebastian nodded, feeling strangely unburdened. In the boardroom, faces once allied now watched him with cautious relief. "I'm stepping down, effective immediately," he said, placing resignation copies before them, and Eleanor Grant's question, "Are you certain?" met his resolute, "What I want is irrelevant. New leadership gives the company a chance." The silence was heavy, but Sebastian felt lighter, the chains of his empire loosening as he walked away from 20 years of ambition. The transition meeting dragged for 3 hours, succession plans and damage control blurring into irrelevance as Sebastian detached from the company he'd built. News of his resignation leaked by noon, sparking a slight stock rally, a bitter confirmation that his exit was celebrated. Packing his office, a single box held his items, a stark testament to a life consumed by work. "Your severance documentation," Clara said, handing him an envelope, her eyes searching his. "You're doing the right thing, not just for the company, but for yourself," she added, and Sebastian nodded, her words echoing Lila's hope. Outside, reporters clamored, but he ignored them, his feet carrying him toward Brooklyn, drawn to a world of tree-lined streets and authentic lives that contrasted sharply with his fallen empire. The 2-hour walk across the Brooklyn Bridge cleared his mind, the city's skyline receding as Park Slope's warmth emerged, and Sebastian felt a flicker of freedom in his uncertainty. 3 weeks later, after days of silence where he read novels, walked unfamiliar neighborhoods, and talked with Lila about dreams long buried, he stood outside Brewhaven at 7:30 a.m., clutching 2 cups from a rival café, nerves rawer than any boardroom showdown. Willow, opening the shop, froze when she saw him, her blonde braid catching the dawn light. "We're not open yet," she said, her voice neutral but wary. "And what's with the coffee?" "I brought the enemy's product," he said, holding up the cups, his smile tentative. "Thought you'd like to taste it." She almost smiled, but her guard remained. "Talk, Sebastian," she said, and he stepped inside, the cafe's familiar warmth a lifeline. "I resigned 3 weeks ago," he said, setting the coffees down, her shock palpable as she flipped the open sign, "Buying time." "Why?" she asked, her hazel eyes probing for deception, and he sighed. "Everything fell apart. FDA, stock, my ethics." The confession felt like shedding armor, and he leaned closer. "I built an empire on lies, and it hurt people." "I don't read the news," she said, softer now. "But I'm sorry." "Don't be. Losing it forced me to see what I need," he said, meeting her gaze. "To be someone worth knowing. Someone you'd consider." Her silence stretched, heavy with the past, and she asked, "What do you want?" "To apologize for using you, to ask for a chance to build something real," he said, his voice raw, and her expression softened though caution lingered. "I'll think about it," Willow said, Her words neither a yes nor a no, but a crack in the door that Sebastian hadn't dared hope for. As he left Brewhaven, the city's morning buzz felt less oppressive, her promise to reconsider a fragile thread pulling him forward. He walked back to Manhattan, the weight of his failures still present, but lighter, as if Willow's hesitant openness had planted a seed of possibility. The man who'd lost everything was beginning to glimpse a path, not to reclaim his empire, but to rebuild himself. And the prospect of earning her trust, however daunting, felt like the first true victory in years. Tomorrow, he'd wait, not for power or profit, but for a chance at redemption, knowing the journey ahead would test him in ways his corporate life never had. Sebastian and Willow's tale of redemption and love reminds us that true success lies in connection, not conquest. What did you think? Did their story stir your heart or spark a memory of your own? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're listening from. Your city might light up our next story. Your support keeps these tales alive, so hit that subscribe button and share the love. Until next time, keep chasing what makes you truly happy, and we'll meet again for another story that weaves the magic of destined love. See you soon.